So we are going to start with the new topic, and it's actually a very important topic, and that is calculations. How do we calculate stuff, and why is that important? Because measurement करनी होती है, measurement हमें usually we use numbers for that, and in chemistry that's all the more important because you're making important chemicals, you're manufacturing them, you can find the purity, और उसकी बहुत सी application है. So we'll start with the very basic idea of what AR is. So AR पे हमारे पास एक तो क्वेश्चन आता है 2 मार्क्स का, which is कि AR क्या होता है. So we'll say it is the average mass of all natural isotopes. Now the natural part you can skip if you want, but you have to talk about all isotopes. Compared, AR is the average mass of all isotopes compared to 1/12 of carbon 12. So this part where you're talking about it being the average, that is worth 1 mark. And this part where you talk about how the unit is basically what is 1. So carbon 12 है, तो 12 divided by 12 1 हो जाएगा ना, तो unit कितना होता है? Unit भी तो 1 ही होता है. So हमें unit चाहिए होता है. So ये हमारा unit है. 1/12 मतलब 1 divided by 12 multiply by 12 of carbon, total 1. अब AR निकालने के हमारे पास multiple methods हैं, और AR basically average out करता है चीजों को. So let's take an example. This is a very common example. We have chlorine 35 and chlorine 37. These are the two natural isotopes of chlorine. Now this one exists 75% of the time and this one is 25%. So basically दुनिया में जितने भी atoms हैं chlorine के atoms की बात कर रहा हूँ. So out of those 75% on average are chlorine 35 and 25% on average are chlorine 37. And this thing is called their abundance. So the thing is, अगर मैं आपसे कहूँ कि एक random chlorine atom है, तो वो क्या है? Is it chlorine 35? Is it chlorine 37? और अगर आपको HCl का MR calculate करना है, तो will you take 35 or will you take 37? So to answer this question, what scientists have done is they've taken out the average. Average का फायदा ये होता है कि you can just take that value and it will work out for you, no matter कि वो overall क्या है और उसकी मतलब आपके पास 35 या 37 है, आप average value use करते रहते हो हर दफा. Okay, so how do you figure this out? The simplest method that we have is we multiply the percentage, this percentage that we have, with the mass that you have. So 75%, which is 75 or 100 times 35, and then 37 को हम 25% से multiply कर देंगे, and we'll add the two. If you want, you can also do it like this, कि आप 100 को इस पूरे को बाद में divide कर दें. That is also acceptable. क्या पहले multiply करते हैं and then you divide it. That's also right. Okay. So that is how you can easily get the value. So abundance is going to help you figure this out. Now, a couple of things. The abundance should always add to 100. Okay. Which means that in a case where they don't tell you the abundance of one thing, you can easily figure out the abundance of the other because उसको use करके आप 100 से minus करोगे और आपको answer मिल जाएगा. अच्छा. So this will give out to be 35.5. That is the AR of this thing, relative atomic mass. अब जब भी chlorine की बात होगी, we'll take this average mass and then we will use it for calculations. इसका मतलब ये है कि अगर chlorine molecule को मैं देखूं, so इसमें दो तरह के ऑप्शन है. एक ऑप्शन है कि दोनों में से एक chlorine 35 हो, दूसरा भी chlorine 35 हो, total mass आ जाएगा 70. एक ऑप्शन है एक 35 हो, दूसरा 37 हो, mass आ जाएगा 72. और तीसरा ऑप्शन दोनों 37 हो जाए, because you have Cl2 ना, तो दोनों 37 हो, तो ये आ जाएगा 74. But using the AR, you don't have to worry about कि मेरे पास कौन से वाला है. We only use this one 35.5. इसका मतलब है chlorine Cl2 का मतलब है 2 times chlorine, which is 2 times 35.5, and that is 71. And that is how you calculate MR using the AR. So AR allows you to get rid of all of these multiple calculations and then come up with the simplest option. Okay. So that is one way of looking at AR. Another way to calculate this, and this is not, this is a very interesting approach to this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the number line. So I have 35, 36, 37. And what was my answer? 35.5. Okay, so the average mass AR of chlorine is 35.5. I have two isotopes. One is chlorine 37, which is over here, and one is chlorine 37, which is over here. Now let's figure out how far they are from the AR. So this is 0.5 and this is 1.5. And if I take the ratio of this, so 0.5 ratio 1.5 is basically 1:3. And let's look at their abundances. These are the values. What is their ratio? 3:1. 1:3, 3:1. This is not a coincidence. Basically, the distance on the number line is a flipped ratio of abundance. तो मैं जैसे फॉर्मूला में आप उनको क्रॉस मल्टीप्लाई करते थे ना, वैसे ही आप यहां पे भी इसको फ्लिप कर देंगे and you will get the abundances. So based on this, I can easily figure out कि chlorine 35 जो है वो 3 times है और chlorine 37 जो है वो 1 time है. तो overall बनेगा 4 times 100% करूंगा, मुझे average उनकी percentage मिल जाएगी. So ये 75% आ जाएगा और ये 25% आ जाएगा. So really neat trick to figure this out. Percentages हमें पता चल रही हैं from the relative atomic mass. क्या मुझे percentages को use करके number line को use करके relative atomic mass मिल सकता है? Of course मिल सकता है. Let's take an example. Let's say I have magnesium, and let's say magnesium exists as magnesium 24 and magnesium 26. And they tell us that the AR is 24.3. Now I will use the number line method to figure out कि अच्छा इनकी abundances क्या है. उसने हमें abundance नहीं बताई है, हमने figure out करनी है. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw a number line, 24, 26. Okay, so this is 24.3. How far is this? 0.3. How far is this? 1.7. So the ratio is 0.3, ratio 1.7. I will simply divide this by 10, या मतलब decimal को खत्म कर लेते हैं because दोनों sides पे वही है, 10 से multiply कर देते हैं. So ratio is 3, ratio 17. इसका मतलब है percentage is going to be 3 over, so percentage is basically the flip of this. So ratio percentage की होगी 17:3. तो इसका मतलब है 17 over 20 because total 20 है into 100% and 3 over 20 into 100%. So this one comes out to be 25s are 100, so 85%. And this one is 25s are so 15%. And there you go. I've easily figured out कि अच्छा magnesium की percentages क्या है. Pretty neat, right? So now I want you to do this. I have SB 121 and SB 123, and the AR is 121.75. Go on, try to figure out their percentages. You can look at this if you want to. Okay, so if you haven't done it already, here's the method. Using the number line method, what I'll do is I'll put it here. So 121, 123, 121.75 here. So distance is 0.75 and the distance is 1.25. So the ratio is 0.75, ratio 1.25. दोनों को 25 से डिवाइड कर देते हैं. So the ratio will be 3:8. क्यों मैंने ये decimal को ना basically खत्म कर दिया? Okay, because there were 2 digits after the decimal here, 2 digits after the decimal. I can easily do that. So 3:8, that's what I'm getting. So my overall abundance will be 8:3. Notice that if this is a question in the paper 2, you can use this method as long as you show the steps. अगर examiner को आप इस तरह से बता दोगे कि मैंने क्या किया है, they will accept the answer. Okay, so now this is 8/11 multiplied by 100%. And this is 3/11 multiplied by 100%. And this will give you 11 times 100 होता है 9.99. Oh, sorry, this is 3:5. My bad. Thank you. So what do you get? 5/8 multiplied by 100% and 3/8 times 100%. So 800 divided by 8 is 12.5. 12.5 times 5, 65. 6.5 something, 62.5. And this one, 100 minus that, 37.5. Can somebody confirm if these are correct? I don't have a calculator. You can confirm if the values are correct, but this is how the method is going to be. Now, let's say somebody is not comfortable with this. Somebody's like, ye kya hai? Mujhe ye nahi karna, mujhe koi aur method karna. So here's what another method of doing the same question. So same question, I want to figure out the percentages. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be like, okay, this is X percent. So this is 100 minus X percent because total to 100% on chain. So now I'm going to use the formula. AR is 123 times X percent plus 121 times 100 minus X percent divided by 100. So the AR value I already have is 121.75. So now I'll cross multiply this. So 12175 is equal to 123x. Okay, I'm going to move this here. So 12175 minus 12100 is 2x because 123x minus 121x. So this is just 75. So x is 75 over 2, which is 37.5%. So now I know that the 123 wala is 37.5%. So agar ye 37.5% hai, so this will be 100 minus that, which is 62.5%. So in case you have this method, that is also going to work. For MCQs, I will still think ki ye method, the number line method works. And I'm actually really proud of this because मैंने ये खुद ही method बनाया था when I was a student. And I think grade 9 या grade 10 में हमने पढ़ा था. तो मुझे ये algebra वाला method जो था ना थोड़ा सा mistake कर जाता होता था मैं plus minus करने में. So this method, I'm actually really proud of it. Okay. Moving on. So now we know this. Now here's a trick question. Bromine के दो isotopes हैं. एक है bromine 79, एक है bromine 81. Its AR is 80. Using this, can you tell me for 1 mark, what is their percentage? So the answer is, because this is right in the middle, this should be 50 and 50%, both of them. So they are both equally present. So that's how you figure out the AR. Ab AR humne calculate kar liya na. So the next thing is MR. MR is actually really easy. MR is the molecular mass. But more than molecular mass, we will call it relative mass. Okay. अब relative mass का मतलब ये है कि अगर ये molecule का है तो हम इसे बोलेंगे relative molecular mass. So covalent bonding. अगर ये किसी भी giant structure का है, अगर molecule है तो relative molecular mass. But if it is for a giant structure, वो sodium chloride हो सकता है, वो graphite हो सकता है, वो silicon dioxide हो सकता है, कोई भी giant structure है. For that, we will call it formula mass. So for molecules, relative molecular mass. For giant structures, relative formula mass. Okay. Method kya hoga? That will simply add everything up. So we'll make a list of all the atoms that are there, and then we'll add everything up. So Na2CO3, for example. Okay. So I'm going to make a list of this. So 2Na plus C plus 3 oxygen. So 2 times 23 plus 12 plus 3 times 16. Okay, so these numbers, I'm getting them from the periodic table. In O levels and IGCSE, we use the values जिनमें maximum वो chlorine का 35.5 1 decimal place तक देता है, बाकी सब whole numbers में use करते हैं हम. In A levels, we use them to 1 decimal place for all of them. Okay, so we have this. We'll simply do this. 46 plus 12 plus 48. ये बन जाता है 106. So that is the MR, but I will call it relative formula mass because this has ionic bonding. It forms a giant structure. But at the same time, let's say I have water, H2O, तो ये molecule है. तो इसको मैं relative molecular mass कहूँगा. Same method, I'll make a list of atoms present and plug in their numbers. So 2 times 1 plus 16 for oxygen, that's 18. Now, sometimes you will see situations like this. You have copper sulfate dot 5H2O. This dot basically means that something has ionic bonding or giant structure, and it has made covalent bonding with this. Dot का मतलब होता है कि ये आयनिक है लेकिन इसकी आपस में कोवलेंट है. अब ये कोवलेंट कैसे बनता है, क्यों है, वी विल नॉट गेट इनटू दिस इन ओ लेवल्स और इवन इन एएस. A2 में हम इसको थोड़ा बहुत देखेंगे. सो बट दैट्स हाउ दिस इज. इससे हमारे एमआर पे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा. विल जस्ट कैलकुलेट एवरीथिंग अप. So we have one copper, we have one sulfur, we have 4 oxygen, plus we have 5 water. Notice that this 5 is just with water. So I have 5 water, or water is H2O. We just calculated it. It is 18. So I'll just plug in all the numbers. I think copper is 64. This is 32. This is 16. You should take the values from the periodic table. And water we just calculated was 18. So this is 160 plus 90, that's 250. So that is the relative formula mass. I will not call it molecular mass. This is relative formula mass because this is giant structure. This is ionic bonding. Okay. So ye 250. Now we use MR to figure out something called percentage by mass. Percentage by mass is a very useful tool that we have, especially जब हम किसी भी चीज में contribution from any one element देख रहे हैं. So for example, अगर आप mining कर रहे हो और आपको deposits मिले हैं, एक rock है जिसमें से आपको पता लगता है कि only 3% of this rock is gold. So then you will figure out कि अच्छा 3% है, इस rock का कितना weight है, तो is it worth mining or not? Because हो सकता है कि आपके mining पे इतनी cost आ जाए कि वो gold बेच के पूरी ना हो. So percentage by mass is a useful technique that we have to figure out कि अच्छा ये चीज judgments करने के लिए useful है, whether something should be done or not. So let's say I take this thing, copper sulfate with 5H2, and I want to extract copper from it. So here's what I'll do. I'll be like, okay, I have the formula copper sulfate dot 5H2O. Okay, what percentage of this is copper? So I'll be like, percentage of copper is, kitna hai copper mere paas? Copper 1 hai. Divided by MR. I have already calculated the MR, that's 250. So 250 times 100%. So copper is 64 over 250 times 100%, whatever the value comes out to be. Similarly, if I wanted to calculate percentage of oxygen in this, so I'll simply be like, okay, I have 4 oxygen divided by 250, which is the MR, times 100%. And so that's again 4 times 16 over 250 into 100%, और मेरे पास इसका आंसर आ जाएगा. Similarly, अगर मुझे वो कहता है कि अच्छा what's the percentage of water in this, तो ठीक है, percentage of water के लिए भी मुझे देखना है कि अच्छा percentage of water is, I have what, 5 water. So 5 water divided by 250, which is the total MR, into 100%. So that is 5 times 18 over 250 into 100%, which is 90 over 250 into 100%. And that is my answer. I'll put it in a calculator and I'll get my answer. Okay, I hope this is clear to everyone. As a test, I will ask you to solve it for this compound. Find the percentage of cobalt, percentage of water in this compound. If you need the AR values, cobalt is 59, chlorine is 35.5, hydrogen is 1, oxygen is 6. All right, so many of you have given me an answer and correct answers. Thank you so much. And in case you weren't able to do it, so first thing you should find the MR. So MR is CO plus 2Cl plus 5 water. CO is 59, 2 times 35.5 plus 5 times, sorry, this shouldn't be 5, this should be 6 actually. My bad. But your method is correct. अगर आपने 5 को use किया है, 5 times 18, जो भी हमारे पास answer आएगा. And once we have that, we can easily use that to figure out the cobalt. So cobalt is 59 over the MR times 100%. And water is going to be 6 into 18 over 100%, sorry, over MR times 100%. These two compounds, COCl2 and CuSO4. So COCl2 and CuSO4, they are very interesting. In this form,
excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, the where we are multiplying it in with like 100%, it's giving us the wrong answer. It's just multiply by 100, because if you multiply it with 100%, it goes to 0.26 something.
That is because when you say percent, that means divide by 100 as well. तो जब 100% को कैलकुलेटर में डालोगे ना, तो वो कैलकुलेटर समझेगा आप ये कह रहे हो कि 100 divided by 100. So obviously वो सिर्फ आपको इतना आंसर देगा, ये तो 1 बन जाएगा. So that is why whenever we find in calculation, whenever we take percentage, we take 100 and we take percentage as a sign. कि अच्छा अगर ये 100 होता तो उसमें से ही कितना होता, ठीक है? So good observation. Okay, so I was saying these two compounds are interesting, especially for us in ONA levels. Why? Because these are the compounds that bond with water and change their colors. So cobalt chloride, when you add some water to it, it makes this compound. And copper sulfate, when you add this to water, it makes this compound. अब इसका फायदा ये है कि कलर चेंज होती है. तो this one goes from blue to pink, and this one goes from white to blue. What this means is कि अगर मुझे colorless liquid मिला हुआ है, I will just need to add one drop of it into this or this. And if there's a color change, I'll know कि उस colorless liquid में water है. उसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि वो water है, क्योंकि हो सकता है वो mixture हो, ethanol का water के साथ mixture हो, या किसी और चीज का water के साथ mixture हो. All it tells me is कि उसमें water है, because if the water is present, then this will be able to convert and form this, and that will show a change in color. This is called anhydrous, and this is called hydrated. And that is how you figure out the percentage. Oh, sorry. That is how you figure out whether there is a water available in whatever you have or not. So this we call test for water. So this is something you need to remember. All right. So that brings me to the end of this percentage by mass and all of this. And for the last thing today, we are going to do empirical formula. So here's what empirical formula is. First of all, hota kya? 2-mark definition. Empirical formula gives the simplest ratio of elements in a compound. Okay, so empirical formula gives the simplest ratio of elements in a compound. That's what this is. Where do we use it? All giant structures. All giant structures have empirical formula. They don't have molecular formula. Only simple molecular substances have molecular formula. So जब मैं आपसे कहता हूँ NaCl, I do not mean कि इसमें 1 sodium and 1 chlorine है. All this means is that you have 1:1. जितने sodium है उतने chlorides हैं. Similarly, when I say CaCO3, I do not mean that I have actually 1 calcium and 1 carbon and 3 oxygen. It just means that that is the ratio in which they're combined. But when I say C2H5OH and I tell you that this is a molecular formula, this basically means I have actually 2 carbon atoms, 5 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen, and 1 hydrogen joined like that. So this is the actual number which is available in the molecular formula and compared to ratio which is available in the empirical formula. Okay, so how do you figure this out? The methods are pretty straightforward. Step 1, you have to take the mass or the percentage by mass, doesn't matter which one, but one of them, and you divide by AR. For those of you who understand this, basically you're dividing mass by AR. What will you get? Mole. So technically we're trying to figure out the moles or the moles of element. And second step, you simplify. अब simplify करने के ना हमारे पास 2 methods हैं. One is that we divide by smaller number. So one method is you divide by smaller number. And if that doesn't work, then the second method is you multiply by LCM. And why are we doing this? Because we want to simplify it to whole numbers. So let me do an example. Let's say हमारे पास, this is the example number 1 from your worksheet. So I have sulfur and I have oxygen. Sulfur is 40%, oxygen is 60%. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ignore this first. Okay, now I'm going to do the first step, which is divide by AR. So divide by 32, divide by 16. This one gives me 1.25 and this one gives me 3.75. Now I have this. I will obviously divide by the smallest. That's my second step. So this gives me 1:3. And that's my answer. My answer is S1O3. Don't forget to write the formula at the end. Sometimes students forget. वो यहाँ तक करते हैं और फिर छोड़ देते हैं. Don't forget to do that. Okay, so that's how you figure out the empirical formula. Now here's the thing. Empirical formula is related to the molecular formula. For example, I have C6H12O6. ये उसका empirical formula उसने मुझे दे दिया, molecular formula दे दिया. मुझे empirical निकालना है. So I will simply divide it by 6. So you get CH2O. Okay. Now here's an interesting observation. The empirical mass, basically the mass of empirical formula, is 1 carbon, 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen. So this is 12 plus 2 times 1 plus 16, which is 30. And MR of this thing is 180. And there's a relation here. 180 divided by 30 is equal to this divided by this. Because अगर मैं 180 को 30 से divide करता हूँ, I get 6. I multiply 6 by this, I get this. In other words, if you have the empirical formula, you just need the MR and you will figure out the molecular formula. An examiner आपसे कभी-कभी 1 mark question पूछ लेता है कि what information do you need after empirical formula to figure out the molecular formula? The answer is molecular mass. कैसे आप करते हैं? You simply take this divided by whatever empirical formula you have, 30 है for example यहाँ पे, 6 आ गया, multiply 6 with this, you'll get your molecular formula. Okay, thank you so much.